Okay, we're back, and we ended already kind of talking about, as a sponsor, what's the return on investment you see, and we've touched a little bit on you as a lawyer, and you've already feel like apologized and maybe too much because you're aware of some of the negative stereotypes around lawyers about that. You're advertising your services as anybody should and can do, but yet, of course, you don't want to feel like you're pushing your service on people. You get that reputation of they're just wanting people to crash, kind of, or they're smiling when people crash, right? And I think it's really important to say that that is not the case, and you're the big part of the community, and I think that is probably true but it's a tricky line to walk between being there and having your name out there and not seeming like you're waiting for people to crash or things to happen, then blowing up the case or something like that. And I think you can talk a little bit about that, but then also my second question is going to be kind of how you first got into it, really by seeing the value it had, the advertising, the community, that you really turned more into a bike accident lawyer rather than just a person, like a more general personal injury lawyer.
Right. I mean, look, the last thing, honestly, I want is anybody in our community call me up and say, I got hurt.
Yeah.
That's the last thing. And people, I think, understand that because they know me. I'm one of them. I'm out on the road. I've been run down twice. You know, when I was in high school, I was riding in Prospect Park in the bike lane, and a cop was coming in the opposite direction in the bike lane.
With a car.
In a car, and took me out. I mean, I flew over, I don't remember this, is what the other people told me. Flew over the roof of the car, smashed the lights on the roof of the car, landed out cold in the roadway in Prospect Park right by the zoo.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know how bad it is. I was hospitalized for a while. I was lucky, I ended up being okay, but we didn't ride with helmets back then, too. So.
Yeah, so you've seen it. I've crashed, and I've been fortunate enough that I wasn't too bad either. But it's likely to happen more. There's a chance, and obviously, then I think it is important that, and that's part of why I bring you in. I think it's important that people are aware that it's more than just like getting up and maybe thinking about, okay, what just happened and what was the situation, and obviously it maybe depends on if you just have a scratch on the elbow and you can talk it out with the person, but I think it's important to be aware, certainly of the things you shouldn't be doing to yourself, but also of your rights, right?
I always recommend to, ride with lights on your bike, especially the flashing headlight during the day. Because when you're on 9W and you see somebody coming in the opposite direction with a flashing light, you see them hundreds of yards away approaching you, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have a light on, and you see them when they get really close to you. And that's what happens with people are driving around their car, they're looking at their phone, they're texting, they're making a left-hand turn, they're looking to see if cars are coming in the opposite direction. They don't look off to the left side of the road to see if you're coming. They don't see any cars coming, and they just make a left-hand turn, and then they never get hurt. Or they see you, but they don't realize how fast you ride. They don't realize that we ride in excess of 20 miles an hour. So, there's a guy on a bike, and they make a left-hand turn, and you come upon them so quickly, and they just didn't look at you long enough to really, it's completely their fault, but they walk away from the scene.
Right.
Yeah, they're fine.
Unheard of.
Right. Yeah. Unheard.
Right. But you're the one, whether you're right or not, right? And I think we've talked about that from like my first resolution to pretty much everybody, that riding in New York, well, the better words, and if you don't learn it, then you learn it the hard way, but you have to learn how to ride, maybe not defensively so much, but like you look ahead and you anticipate, and like you said, like things like, I don't think everybody knows that when they start that, a lot of people in cars do not realize that a cyclist can be going fast or as fast as a car, and they think, I can get out of here and get onto the road and accelerate before the cyclist arrives, or I can make the left turn.
And they're in a rush. Everybody's in a rush to get somewhere.
City, including cyclists, right? And I think, like you said, I think we can be better in terms of having lights and being more visible and being more cautious. But
that's what you could do to protect yourself. I mean, the problem is there's so little space, and everybody, even cyclists, but everybody's in a rush and they're on their phones, and you don't want to put yourself in it's not your fault, but you pretty much have to ride defensively to something, or just anticipate the stupid moves that some people are going to make.
That's how I say it. Like, I think if you're good New York City, driver too, or cyclist, when you are anticipating everybody to do something stupid at any given point in time, like, could happen. Like, you have to be ready for it. So what are you talking about stupid moves or things? What is the most common kind of incident that you're dealing with? Is it like the kind of the car on cyclist accident?
Yeah, most of it is car on cyclist, especially in New York City here, but even on 9W, especially on Hudson Terrace. Here's
Oh, 9W a lot. Okay.
9W, a lot of people get hit. The worst place is Hudson Terrace, believe it or not.
Right by the bridge.
That stretch from the bridge to where you turn onto 9W, that's that roadway, especially when you're going south, because there's so many parking lots, left turns, and people just aren't looking where the drivers aren't looking where they're going. And I always say to people, like, the ride is over at this point, or I do that at this point, because people are going to do stupid stuff driving their car. And you know, to give you an example, one of my friends got hit on Hudson Terrace. And I went to pick up his bike to help him out because he was in the hospital.
So I was still there.
I go to the Fort Lee Police Department to get the bike.
Okay.
The cop says, "Come here, I want to show you something." He brings me in the back. They have a bike room. It looked like a bike shop. It's stacked with bikes. He said, "This is all Hudson Terrace."
So this is the local police department there, or who's in charge of the area there?
Yes.
Fort Lee.
It's in Fort Lee.
Wow.
Yep.
It's funny because Henry Francisco, right, the owner of Kentucky Bicycles, he just today posted a video and was commenting on that on Facebook.
Right, somebody got hit right in front.
Just now, because he posted a video, and to that extent, and it's funny that we're talking about it. It just happened again, and it's happening. He says they now have a first aid kit in the shop because they know it's going to happen regularly. That even minor incident, at least they can help immediately with something. And he was also, I think, referring to the police by basically being very aware of that stretch being an issue, and like everybody goes to 9W, goes through there. There's a lot of car traffic there, and I think there's like a mental switch that doesn't always happen with the cyclists and the drivers too. But there's like one area, there's lots of cars, there's cars parked on both sides. There's probably some doors going on too, and people going on driveways, and
which is what happened outside Henry's place, right? Somebody pulled out in a rush, pulled out of the driveway, and took out the cyclist. You know.
So, and that's a typical incident, right? But I think we're leaving the city and we're on the bridge where we don't have to worry about traffic, and then I think there's, again, on both sides probably. And on 9W, you're also a little bit more, in some ways, safer, at least from people coming from left and right and all the time. So yeah, but that spot is busy always, both cyclists and cars, and some high speed. If you're coming down the mountain, come down the hill as a cyclist, you're going pretty fast. Even like Hudson Terrace.
Hudson Terrace. Yeah, when you're heading back to the bridge, you're moving. That's a pretty steep hill.
Exactly, and I think people then also have switched off, the right's over, and boom, a door opens or a car comes out.
And again, cars don't realize how quickly they glance over and see, oh, that guy's on a bike, and you pull out, and they don't realize.
Right. Again, it's the car's fault in most cases, often, but or most of the time, but I think again, like, we could sometimes be more defensive too. And again, I hate that there's always a conversation on victim blaming, and especially cyclists get the bad. It's like one of the first things that you see in the news, like, oh, the cyclist wasn't wearing a helmet, is as if that mattered for what happened just now, right? So
exactly.
So you see a lot of cars, you see a lot of Hudson Terrace. So you have a lot of experience with that. You're recommending a little bit more defensive riding, but you also...
I hate to say defensive riding,
right,
but
exactly.
You just don't want to put
your...
because I don't want to put any fault on the cyclist. It's not the cyclist's fault, but you realize that people are going to do stupid things, so you have to be cautious because of that. So it's completely not your fault.
Certain behavior rather than say defensive.
It's not your fault,
right?
But I've been doing this over 25 years. I've yet to see somebody in a car injured in a bike car crash.
Right.
They just walk away.
Right. Other than that, they're shocked that they hit somebody, which is
again, I didn't see them. They're shocked. Right.
So,
and then sometimes you get the police report, and it's like, I don't want to go down that road. The police reports I get.
Yeah, I know you can't get into all the details here, obviously, for obvious reasons, but it sounds like you have to do a lot of lobbying and fighting for cyclists and the way the law is currently when you're in these situations, and
it's not so much the law.
With,
it's often what goes into a police report, that when you're dealing with an insurance company, they look at the police report and see what's in there.
Right.
And now the bicyclist is laid out on the street. He's in no position, he or she's in no position to give a statement as to what occurred.
Right.
again, the driver of the car is completely fine. It says, "Oh, this is what happened," and the cops write that down as to what happened. Now, now you're battling. Sometimes the cyclists will give a statement when they weren't prepared for it. Now that's in there. Now the insurance company's taking a position, and they're going to use it in court. Well, look what your bicyclist said occurred.
Right.
Yeah. And then, he talks to the cyclist, I didn't say that.
Right.
I would have never said that. I said, well, it's in the report. The cop's going to come to court and say you said it.
So that is really like that's really the main piece of evidence or the main document that people go to.
I mean, it's often. I mean, the good thing is there's so much video out there now too.
Sure.
There's surveillance everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of people come in with video. They have videos on their camera, helmet cams. And that's helpful.
Yeah.
To get that, but.
Okay.
Some of the video cam is just horrific. You can't, not on the bikes,
right.
You go to a store, track down the video.
Yeah. So that's part of your job sometimes. This is what happened. Can you look at the footage from
we're out
day,
looking for surveillance tape all over, knocking on doors, sending out investigators. Because that tells the whole story usually. If it's a good video.
So what percentage, if you can speak to that, of cases that you deal with is kind of that is cyclists, period, and is it mostly only cyclists that you're dealing with now, and how many of them
in
are
our practice?
like
I'd say about 85% of our practice is cyclists. Unfortunately,
but I mean,
so many.
You say unfortunately, but the reality is it happens, and like if you weren't there, then nobody would support you. So I think
I just hate the fact that people are getting hit.
No, I get it. But I think, I think. I agree.
We all
and
do,
that kind of leads us to that people always, at this point, kind of sarcastically and jokingly refer to Vision Zero, and I think you probably have your own stance on that. What in your, because you see all the cases coming through, and knowing that you're only getting a certain percentage of the cases in New York City, and you're not seeing all of them, and not everybody goes to a lawyer, right? And like a lot of things are just dealt with in the moment or not at all, and
a lot of the cases that I end up representing people on, where you think it would be settled, and think, oh, my bike is totaled, and the guy at the scene or the driver says, oh, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. In our community, that usually doesn't fly, because when you call somebody up and say, okay, I got the receipt, it's going to cost $9,000 for my bike.
They're like, they weren't expecting that.
They thought you bought a bike at Kmart, and maybe you're going to hit them up for $300. Don't call my insurance company. I'll give you the money. I'll pay for your bike. I'll fix it. And then when they find out it's $9,000, nobody answers the phone anymore.
And then
you don't have a police report.
Okay.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. So how far away are we in your estimate? Because again, like the numbers are always like probably underreported, the number of like bike to bike and bike together, bike and pedestrian, bike and car. There's all kinds of accidents that can happen, right? I hate to like always say bikes versus cars and all that, because again, pretty much, well, not all cyclists in the city, but in this city, but like a lot of cyclists drive cars, a lot of people who drive also ride bikes, so they're the same people in the end, like, but in that situation they're not. But looking at what you see coming through your firm, how close are we to like, we're clearly not in a good situation yet, a safe situation for cyclists.
We're not even close.
Right. Obviously Vision Zero is still far away, but like what would it take, or where are we now?
The city has done some good things with the protected bike lanes, lowering the speed limit. That's definitely helped. The problem is people are still texting while they're driving in a rush, as I was saying before, to get places, and there's just not enough space to have bike lanes everywhere until we people aren't so dependent on their car and think that the road is designed for cars, and the cyclist is borrowing their road and in their way and holding them up, until that changes. And you look at Europe, you go ride in Europe, people don't pass you until it's real safe to pass you. They'll sit behind you. Here people blow by you on a curve, on a double yellow line, on a single lane road. Until that mindset changes, it's really not going to get better.
Does it take something more radical? Does it take like just banning cars, say, from Manhattan, or what?
You know,
I obviously, again, I'm not expecting to have the exact solution, but like what?
There was an effort to criminalize negligent behavior, you know, and it just really, nobody gets charged with it. It doesn't fly, you know. And I've spoken to legislators about it, and they said, look, you know, people are negligent. Yeah, we do things, we don't see things that we should see, and we make mistakes, but we don't want to be sending people to jail for that.
Right.
So, you know, that's the argument against it. That would be a real deterrent. If I hit a cyclist, I'm going to jail. You know, it would be a tremendous deterrent. But that's, I don't think, you know,
because I feel like a lot of times now we hear the stories, and that's like the classic line. I feel like in a newspaper report, online news report, is like, so and so got a really, cyclist got hit really bad, or God forbid even got killed, and the driver hasn't been charged with anything yet.
No, right.
And that seems always like this, especially for cyclists in the cycling community, outrageous when you feel like not only are you like, you're not protected at all in that situation, right? And again, like, hopefully you're never in that situation, but I think you read about that and it feels shocking that. And while again, like you said, it's unusual behavior. Should we send somebody to prison for that, or should we? What's the right way of maybe improving that situation or dealing with? Because it doesn't seem, even, you know, even though this is just a newspaper version of what happened and all that, but it always reads a little shocking, almost, to me at least. So when I read that, and then again, maybe a lawyer has a different.
Well, how many times does a cyclist get killed and the driver keeps driving and they pull him over at some point, and he or she says, "I didn't even know I hit anybody." Which
is kind of the classic response. I didn't see him until I hit him.
I didn't even know I hit him.
Right.
So what do you charge him with?
Right.
Unless you have surveillance video or some eyewitnesses,
right?
Or unless the cyclist, God forbid, smashed the windshield, and it's like, come on, somebody smashed your window, you had to see it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I didn't see it. What do the cops charge him with?
Yeah.
You know,
there's just no way to.
You can't say you're charging with fleeing the scene.
Because you first have to prove that there was a scene, like
right. He knew the accident. I think it's well known. I didn't know I hit anybody.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, so that's the space you operate in. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Those are some of the hurdles we,
And that, I don't want to end on that. Well, on a negative note, but I think that's the reality of where we are right now.
It is.
So, given that, you're going to be dealing with cases the same way you have had to, and with the same hurdles, and you don't see much.
We need to change people's mindset.
Okay. Yeah.
About who owns the road and whose benefit. Should the road be shared, or bicyclists borrowing the road and impeding on drivers' ability to get somewhere quicker? That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, in Europe, you don't get that. That's why it's such a pleasure to ride over there.
I think it's more pleasant in my experience, certainly, and I think it's not perfect there either. But I do think that when you compare to actually most big cities in the U.S., I think in some ways New York is better than other cities. It's a little bit more set up for some bikes in some ways, and I think at least having moved from other places here, but there's also so much traffic here and so much fairly aggressive driving, and that it's also more dangerous in other ways. And just the volume is likely to lead to the volume of cars and cyclists is likely to lead to more numbers of accidents and unfortunately fatalities too, probably.
Yep.
And we had a lot last year.
Ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
One is too many, but last year was out of control.
Yeah, and again, you read a lot of these
That was
stories.
a crime,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think anybody got charged.
Yeah, you read some of those stories where you're like, it's fairly obvious what happened there, and cyclists just being stopped at an intersection and getting taken out by cars.
I saw that. Take away that surveillance video and.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Or at least nobody has seen anything.
Right. Exactly.
It happens quickly. It's hard to see something. Yeah.
Right.
So that's tricky. And it sounds like nobody has a good answer. It's just a change of mindset, and hopefully over time that will happen.
Right.
When do you estimate we're going to be a good spot in your lifetime?
For it to change? Oh man, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do.
It's hard. I mean, I ride. Not all the time, especially now I have a little daughter and a little bit more time constrained too, but I do think you ride more carefully after a while.
Right. Well, I think the more people that ride too, because as you said, we're riders and we are also drivers. So once you're in the position of being a cyclist, you realize, hey, when I'm driving my car, I'm going to be respectful of, of somebody riding the bike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a safe distance when I pass them. I'm going to pass them when it's safe. Things like that. So.
Has it then, well, at least by all accounts, I haven't seen any actual like good numbers on that yet, but all accounts say all the bike shops are selling out of bikes, everybody's riding the bikes through the pandemic. Has that, I mean, hopefully that leads to more people thinking like cyclists and more people also being cyclists in the long run. But have you seen any changes in numbers for you since then? Like as a lawyer on the
business,
more cases?
Not really.
No? Interesting.
I mean, with the pandemic, a lot of people weren't driving. The roads were quiet, but I really hope now that all these bicycles have been sold, people start riding for the environment, especially too. People start riding their bikes around, the city, and we don't become, a car society, and we become a bicycle society, which some of the great cities are.
And in New York City, it's certainly possible, right? I often talk to some friends in the Midwest, and they're like, okay, these big distances are hard to deal with for people off bikes, or it's just a state road connecting place A and B.
If you live 20 miles from your job, you're probably, but for a few people.
But obviously here, you may still want to have a car, but you can do so much with a bicycle.
You can.
And you really can. And I know it's a hurdle maybe in the beginning, but hopefully with more people on bikes.
If you work in the 5 boroughs, you could pretty much, depending on where your job is, for the most part, you can get there by bike. It just has to be safe.
So. Even Staten Island is now reachable by bridge again.
Right.
Or the ferry.
The ferry.
Yeah, you can do it.
Right.
It's certainly, but I think you're right. I think a big hurdle is, and I notice that with myself, I think my wife and I always do like be safe out there. So the one thing you kind of say, or just kind of be in that mindset of thinking about being safe. And I think there's a lot of people who don't like riding here because it is still lots of cars around you and pretty close.
Right. We're kind of used to it because we get in a pack of 100 and plus people, and you're used to people. And you're aware of a tight situation you're in and how to get out of it. So.
Absolutely. I think,
but not everybody, is rigid to pack.
It
certainly does.
And I think we joke about the tourists on the city bike sometimes not riding a straight line, which is actually really hard on a city bike at times because it's so heavy that you have to. If you're not going a certain speed, you automatically start swerving a little bit.
The thing weighs a ton.
But I think you often see people who aren't regular riding bikes, and especially in an infrastructure system like New York City, and then you can tell like it takes some time to get used to, right? And then or maybe they're not following the rules in the way they should be, or aren't looking out the way they should be. So that's interesting. But again, from the kind of legal perspective, so lots of cases in that direction. What else do you see as a lawyer that maybe is noteworthy, or is a change? I'm interested in that perspective again, because I think you have a unique insight there that you had one as a sponsor to, of events and groups, but from that perspective, you see a lot of cases still, and again, we only kind of scratch the surface because a lot of cases don't get reported and don't end up with a lawyer. But do you think it's a fairly bike-friendly environment? So legally speaking, it's not in terms of the law currently.
Well, when you say is the law against cyclists, is that what you mean? It's not against cyclists. The law. I mean, really, for the most part, the rules of the road that apply to cars apply to cyclists.
Right.
So I wouldn't say it's against cyclists. It's more the attitudes of drivers that I think are against cyclists.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll go back to my questions here.
Let's talk about getting people into cycling.
Yeah, I think, like I said, by all accounts, I mean, all the bicycle manufacturers have sold out. All the bike shops are sold out.
They're all sold out, but my understanding is they can't get inventory, so they sold everything they had, and now there aren't more bikes to sell.
All the factories or the supply chains were kind of closed down or shut down, or maybe still are. It's a bit of both. I agree. It seems like the demand is higher, but they certainly could still sell more. They would be selling more if their supply chains would be affected.
I'd like to find a way to get more kids into cycling, into bike racing, and into the community.
And we talked about that in terms of things you sponsored, like only being road and track events. But it's also for lack of, and again, it makes sense. You have a big city where you're going to put a mountain bike race, right? And you have a hard time even putting road races on. You have one velodrome, they're lucky in that situation. we currently have one cross race in the city itself. There's a mountain bike park out in Queens, Cunningham Park, but I don't think they may have maybe an occasional race there or so, but they're pretty small, I think. And I think a lot of, when you look at the West Coast especially, but also now around the country, NICA, the kind of a high school, I think maybe middle school too, like a mountain bike league at the school level.
It's huge. Outside the city.
Thousands and thousands of young kids, which is fantastic for the sport, I think. Or just bike riding in general, right? And it's hard to emulate that here, I think. But what can we do? What can be done differently? I don't know if like school teams are the solution. That's also hard to do, right? In the city.
It is. It's hard. I mean, the parks are great because what you really need is a controlled environment with kids.
Yeah.
It's hard to take kids on 9W. We're at all different levels and say, okay, we're going for a bike ride, and you have kids spread over 5 miles, you know, because one kid, you know, somebody's so much faster. So that doesn't really work. But in the parks, and especially like if you take Star Trek, those guys compete. They're doing unbelievable job. Yeah, because that's a controlled environment. Same with mountain biking or cross. You know, you're off the roads. Even if you get split up, you're not riding, you know, on a road where cars are going 50 miles an hour and you're 13 years old riding by yourself. So it's hard. We need to find ways to get kids into racing by using the environment, you know, the environments that we have, such as the parks, which is difficult. It's hard to get kids involved into it. I mean, every kid grows up with a bike.
Yeah, right.
That you would think.
So you think you have that head start, kind of, right?
You would think there'd be kids clamoring to race their bike. My kids grew up with a bike. My daughter went to high school and she rode crew. We don't have a rowboat. We never had a boat. What are you doing on a boat? So like you said, we'd have a head start, but how do we you know, develop that?
And I think it's already a win if everybody knows how to ride a bicycle and rides it regularly, right? I think that's like we just changed about more people riding bikes. I think that's already a win. I think from a perspective of people who are like road cyclists, but also competitive cyclists in general, we also want more people on mountain bike, more people on riding, and maybe then also if they like racing, cross and road and all that. But that's hard. Again, I think talking about with prior guests with like the additional cost, of course, of a bike and all. It's a lot more expensive than a basketball, you know, and shoes maybe.
But when I mean, I hate to go back years ago, but when I was a junior, you could field the junior field. At the training series, there would be junior races with 40, 50 kids every race.
Really?
And now a promoter can't have a junior race because for the most part, you get 5 kids, 6 kids. You know, it's not much of a race. And the difficult thing is, okay, now I'm a 13 or 15-year-old kid, and I'm racing with guys like me. That's not, you know.
That's hard.
It's hard. Guys like you, I got to go, you know.
I'm towering over them.
Right, exactly. That's not that much fun.
No.
You know. So I think a lot more kids would come to the sport if you could overcome the hurdle, which they've done out west with the mountain biking series, and just get it going, and then you get the influx. We're not there. We're, you know. At this point, we're going to make junior races going to be like 30 and under. You know, the way we're going in New York, because everybody's getting so old. You know, 30 plus is going to be senior.
Yeah, and I think people talk about, I joke about it. I think it's not a completely in a comparison like cycling is the new golf or a new golf, but it attracts a certain age and demographic maybe in some ways. And it makes a lot of sense, right? You have more money to spend on a bike, and it's a little bit easier of an investment to make, and in a lot of ways it's a sport that can replace other sports that maybe you play when you were younger and maybe can't play anymore, or are just too demanding, or you have problems with your ankles or your knees or something like that. Or and cycling is, a lot of doctors recommend that still, right?
You could do it your whole life. I mean, you're not going to call up your buddy now and say you want to wrestle.
Right.
You know, if you did it in college, why don't you come over? We'll
or
wrestle.
I go out playing soccer. If I were to play now a game, I'd probably be out for a week.
So my ankles, my knees would be killing me. So it is a sport, and it is kind of the new golf. It is, but it's not with so much with respect to bike racing.
Right.
Which is fine. It's great. I mean, Fondos, they get a ton of people. You know, so in that aspect, and you look, there's tons of people out riding, older men and women riding, which is great. Look at New York Cycle Club. which is not a racing club. They do fantastic. They have, I don't know how many members, thousands.
And
it's
mentioned
great
that
to
it's a
see.
great way to get into bike riding and road biking, and then also if you want to, you can get into racing. Yeah.
Right.
So, but when you look at 50, you said like you had your own dedicated junior fields. What do you think has changed? Again, like I don't want to say the old times were always better. We've talked already how in a lot of ways the modern times are better.
I think it's better now.
It's better now, right?
Yeah,
I think everybody has come to that consensus.
Yeah.
But I think there were some things that were different or better, like bigger junior fields. Were there fewer like other things to do? Was it like I don't know the big boom sport at the time, where like say Le Mans or something like that? Was that what was bringing people? It wasn't that?
Nah, it wasn't.
What was the difference? Do you think there was something you could
why
point to?
more kids were into it then?
Why do we have? If I don't want to CRC as a development team, but I would say under the age of 18, people I know that are riding bicycles, and maybe I don't have enough knowledge, but like I would say we can, if you're not counting the Star Trek kids that are racing, it's like a handful.
Here's my theory. I don't know if it's correct, but when I was a kid, you could pretty much do whatever you want. Most kids, you could do whatever. I would say to my parents, I'm going over the GW Bridge.
Yeah.
You know, I lived in Brooklyn. We'd get on our bikes. We'd ride. There was no bike path. There was no greenway. We'd ride through Midtown Manhattan, hit the GW Bridge. There were no bike lanes, and go over the bridge and get back at sunset, hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, if my kid said to me at 4:30 after school, we're heading over the GW Bridge, you know, from Brooklyn, I'd say, no, you're not.
Yeah,
You're not,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So I think parents, you know, and I get it, are
Of
not
course,
going to
yeah.
allow their
Right.
kids to go do the things that kids did in the past.
Right.
You know, especially going training on the open roads by themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think
In the
that, you know,
streets
that's why I
and-
talk about the controlled environment.
Yeah.
So a parent drops their kids off at Casino, and they're going to race around the track, and they're going to come
Perfect.
back 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah, but
You
you
know?
could do that, like you said, within reason. In certainly Prospect Park,
In
which
the
may be a little more
parks.
manageable than Central Park.
Right.
Just not being as big of a loop, and
Right.
maybe not quite as busy most of the time. But there's probably ways to set that up.
Right.
Yeah.
You could even do the cutoffs in Central Park.
Yeah.
It's getting how do you
True.
get the kids to do it? So
Maybe stay on the northern side. That's a little less busy and all
Right.
that. Yeah. So, but you'd have to have a setup. And again, you're probably still running into permitting again nowadays. You couldn't just be.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if you did a bunch like 10, 15 kids, I guess you could. I don't think
Yeah,
you need a
yeah,
permit
yeah.
to go
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
group ride.
Keep it careful.
And you could also do it now with Zwift too, or indoor training.
Yeah.
You know, you could, and I know, you know, some of the programs I think the Star Trek are doing on, you know, indoor training.
Are they doing more of that
They
now?
are.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, you know, but you have to. How do you get kids out there racing? That's, you know, I don't know the answer.
Well, those are pretty
in
good
the city.
attempts and solutions. Right, in the city, because we're talking about the local
The
way
local scene.
of making it happen.
I get
right?
it in California. It's
Yeah.
a great scene out west. The
Well, it's a lot
mountain
of travel
biking
too,
is
but
great.
they have it there, right?
Well, they're
It's
doing
within
it's
the
high
range.
schools are running it.
Right.
So, and that, if you look at USA Cycling, and I don't know if it falls on them, but there's no development really in high school cycling for the most part. Besides in this part of the world, here,
Right.
there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's no high school cycling teams. There's some collegiate. Collegiate is a lot of colleges. It's just a club sport.
Yeah, I
It's-
was in the, and I think a lot of opportunities are wasted there too.
Yeah.
For retaining, and because I think a lot of kids get into it in college too. Like, and then I think there could be a lot more getting in that way. But that, again, I think there's college teams at least here. Columbia and NYU have.
Right.
There might be more. Those are the two that I know and are present for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you've outlined some good solutions there. I think those are certainly starting points. So the high school is going to be hard to realize, I think, here. Yeah.
It is. It's got to be really hard.
Being realistic. Yeah.
Yep.
We can dream, but
Yeah.
So I think we've already touched on a lot on my closing questions, but I'm just going to ask him anyway, because I think you have a lot of good ideas, and maybe there's something we haven't touched on yet. But like looking at the New York City, we can talk bike racing, but also just cycling in the city and the community scene. What's working well? What's missing? What's standing out to you? That if you were to describe it to an outsider, what can you expect, or how is it different, maybe, or how is it unique, or you can talk about, if that is something that comes to mind more easily, what do we still, and we have talked about safety and we've talked about junior development. That's why I'm saying we've already answered these questions to some extent. What's missing, or what can be done better, or what's going well?
I think what's going well is the community.
Yeah.
Especially with social media.
It's improved.
You know, because you know where people are. You know how to meet up with people. You know, before there was social media, you just had a couple of people you rode with, and you didn't know what anybody. You didn't know who was at training camp. You didn't know who was riding over the bridge that weekend. It wasn't. You know, you didn't know what everybody was doing or where to meet up with them. And now with social media, it's great. And so, as I was saying before, CRCA does a great job with that. You know, with the whole getting everybody together for events and the races, having bagels after the races, coffee, things like that are great.
Yeah.
I think the racing scene is great, but for the youth, we need the youth. That's which we talked about. We need kids. We're all getting. I mean, I know I'm aging. We're getting old, and we need some younger people to get into the sport.
Is New York City maybe never fully going to suffer that problem because there's always an influx of new people who come here in their 20s and 30s professionally, and they are, in some ways, they are the new people we develop here in the city who get into the sport because they've seen it or they see other people riding?
I don't know the answer as to how most people are actually getting into the sport.
I think there needs to be
how they end up falling into it. I know, Alex does a great job. With his development program he's brought in a ton of people.
Right.
College swimmers and different college athletes who, again, as we were saying, don't do the sport anymore that you did in college and get into cycling. But how do you recruit more of those people? I don't know how many people.
It's really a great sport. You can chat, as I always say, I did some trials one, but you can only look at tiles for so long, and what are you gonna do all the time? And you can chat with people while you're riding. You can ride with them. You can see different places.
And you can do it by yourself
until you die. Well beyond that. Well beyond that. Still, you still got lots of good years of riding.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think you do. Junior development is what we take away, or just think about the next generations. What we gotta think about here. But as the bike racing scene in New York City, safety overall, I think.
Right.
I think we could end it here. I think we've covered so much already. We could still go, for legal reasons, we can't go all the details of the legal cases.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we're looking forward to 2021 and really keep our fingers crossed that there's going to be several Lucarelli, Castaldi, and other race series next year. I'm looking forward to freezing in March, hopefully, and being on the line in Central Park or Prospect Park.
That's one thing that we might want to change. We start the season so early, and then September, October is beautiful.
Yeah. As evidenced right now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're sitting outside. It's almost October. It's beautiful, but we're racing March 1st.
That maybe is a conversation we need to have as a scene. I'm kind of with that the season ends for us in late August, early September at the latest.
By August, I don't know. People disappear. I don't know if they're going on vacation with their family and friends or what, and it tapers off, or I don't know if it's because people have been racing since March.
Yeah, and the school year starts again. Maybe parents have to go back to some of those duties, or it changes the schedule, or maybe not.
I don't know.
Or maybe it is actually something that would very easily be possible to change. I know Charlie has a race usually, and CRCA had a turkey race too when I first came here.
We did sponsor that a couple years ago.
Yeah, and Charlie has the Casino Classic, Fall Classic, and I think it sells out. It sells very well. I think some people have retired their bikes for the season for sure, but like you said, I think weather-wise, it would probably be more pleasant.
See, the good thing is too, you're in shape. So you don't even need that time of the year. You could just ride. You don't even need to train.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. When I start in March, then I feel like by August I'm kind of done. Physically almost and mentally.
And we do branch.
That is because you start so early. So maybe if we start in May or even April, then maybe that wouldn't
be a little warmer, and you would maybe race long. I mean, we do the Branchburg series too.
Yes.
Which I know you race.
Yes, that's right. Out in New Jersey.
Which is a great series.
Which is really a New York City race in some ways too, because it's so close.
It's so easy to get to.
Yeah.
But man, you get out there, and it's some race, especially when I do the Masters races. The first race at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. You have to like the sport to be there on the line, and I every year I think I should write down what I need to be wearing in that kind of weather, and every year forget, and then I relearn the hard way. And, on the 1st of March or whatever it is. And
Right.
I thank Tom for putting it on, and I love that series. But
Yeah, they do a great job.
it is very cool. All right, well,
Okay.
we thank
We
the
could talk
community.
forever.
We thank Phil. Exactly. We don't want to talk forever and bore people, but we have some ideas for next year, and 2021. It's hopefully going to be a good year.
Yeah, hopefully.
And then we'll talk again.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.